very kind and generous viewer from Singapore sent me a couple of pens, and one of the pens he sent me is a Hero 332, which looks like this. And on the outside, it is somewhat Parker 51-like, not as much as the Hero 616 or the Hero 100, I believe, but on the inside it definitely is. I actually thought that on the outside it looked a bit Schaefer-like, with this sort of short clip and the flat top. So today we're going to be having a look at this. I'll tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then I'll do a writing sample. Let's start with the parts of the pen. On top of the cap, finial, there is actually nothing. You can see my webcam in there, it's very reflective. I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm afraid I cannot let you do that. Anyway, here is the clip. The clip says Hero, and the clip is spring-loaded. Now that is pretty cool. The pen at this price level, I think that is very, very nice. Then here it says, I assume Hero, but I'm sorry guys, I can't read Chinese characters. And then it says 332, and then at the back it says made in China. The barrel is a type of burgundy color on this specific pen, but I'm sure they come in a bunch of colors, which is usually the case with these Chinese pens. Then the end of the barrel, you have a little vent hole. Yes, it is an actual hole. I'm not sure how well you could see that, but it's completely punctured. The cap slips off, and very fascinating. I'll come back to that in a second. You have the cap. You have the section. Now, what I got out for you here is, for those of you who are not familiar with that pen, at the bottom is a vintage Parker 51. It has to be vintage and no longer produced. And at the top here is this Hero 332. So I'm sure you see a bit of a overlap there. Now, as I understand it, Hero was actually a Parker factory in Shanghai, and at some point the Chinese government took over that factory, and they kept creating the 51 type pens. That's why they're still available today. Alright, so the section is very 51-like. It's a bit longer than a 51 section, and it doesn't really have an ink window. Not that a 51 has that, but this is a somewhat textured ring, and then you have the hooded, very fine nib with the feed. It's a little bit broken off in my pen, and I keep getting ink in the cap and on my fingers with this pen, so I'm not sure whether maybe from the section it leaks a little bit. In any case, you fill it by unscrewing this part, and then you actually have a type of ink window in there, which is quite cool because it is an arometric filled converter, and I have to say, as far as arometrics go, this one actually draws up a decent amount of ink, which is cool because I've used a lot of these arometric converters, especially on Chinese pens, that draw up maybe 2 or 3 drops of ink and that's it. But this one actually takes in quite a bit of ink. So for those of you not familiar with the system, you dip the pen in an ink bottle and you squeeze this bar. In there is a little sac. You compress it, and when you decompress it, it draws up ink from the bottle. And you can unscrew the section of this pen. Maybe you can somehow remove the converter, but I have to look into that. Maybe I should put it in disassembly line or something. Or, of course, ask Hamish McNag to do that. No! As to the rest of the pen, it posts, and then you get a very decently sized pen. You can also use it unposted, of course, in which case I also think it's pretty decently sized. Okay, let's talk about things that I like and that I don't like about this pen. Well, what I like is quite a couple of things. The spring-loaded clip to me really is a bonus because I've had a bunch of Chinese pens, for example the Hero 616s, whose clips I actually bent accidentally. So this is very nice. To be honest, I like the overall looks of the pen. Gold and burgundy for me typically works pretty well, so I like that color scheme. Again, there is ink on the, let me grab a cloth, sorry. Again, there is ink on the section. I have to look into that probably a bit in the cap there. I'll just post it. I think it's a very decent size. And one thing I like is I'm one of those persons who holds their pens fairly highly. I'm exaggerating a bit now. And often you get threads or a step down from the barrel. It gets in the way when you do that. But because this pen has a pretty long section, you can actually hold it fairly highly without feeling anything from the barrel or step down, etc., which I like a lot. The aromatic filler in this case I think is an advantage because it actually draws out quite some ink, at least mine does, which is very cool. So in all, I think it's a pretty decent little pen. Alright, let's take a couple of measurements before we do the writing sample. Capped, the pen is 133 millimeters. Uncapped, it's 120 exactly. Section diameter at the narrowest point, where I guess you can still hold it, it's a little hard to say, but it's about 7.5 millimeters. At the widest point, it's about 10 millimeters. Okay, now when it comes to weight, the pen weighs in about 10 grams, so it's not super heavy, and just for comparison purposes, here's a Parker 51 that weighs in at a good 20 grams, so they're a little bit heavier. Okay, thanks a lot for sending me this pen. I enjoy it. I think we need to see how it writes next. That's what we're going to do. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, writing with the Hero 332. Whoops, that was the cap. The nib is fine. I wouldn't go so far as to call this extra fine, but it's on the edge of being extra fine. Here we have Gerbin Rouge Opéra ink, and the paper is Clairefontaine. Okay. The nib is not terrible, but it definitely gives feedback. And for me it's too much feedback, so there was probably not a lot of tipping material, this being such a fine nib, but I would try to smooth this out. So it is, the thing is, I don't really would call this, well, in these motions it's scratchy, in these motions it's just a lot of feedback, so I would definitely check that. The tines seem to be aligned, so I don't think that's the problem. Okay, bit of fast writing. You see, that's pretty good. There was a little bit of a skip there, but it's very minor. So the feed does keep up very well with the writing. Okay, here we have the wetness, also a property of the paper and the ink used, but it's a relatively wet pen, which is kind of nice. That makes it nice and lubricated when you write, so that helps a bit in making it not too scratchy. Line variation, a little bit to be had, but you really have to push down hard, so don't expect too much. Finally, a bit of reverse writing. You can do that, and then you get an extra fine nib, and actually it does seem to keep running, and it's not even extremely scratchy, so that's not too bad. So, thanks a lot for sending me this pen. It's an interesting one to try out. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.